Our top story takes us to the UK, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson says today he will ask Parliament to call early elections next month. He said this after losing a first-stage vote to cross-party MPs looking to block a no-deal Brexit on October 31st.
21 ruling Conservative Party MPs joined opposition parties to defeat the government. The House of Commons voted 328 to 301 to take control of the parliamentary agenda. The heated discussion raged on as anti-Brexit protesters demonstrated outside Parliament. The cross-party alliance can legislate to delay Brexit following today's parliamentary debate. Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn has said the bill should be passed before elections are held. But Johnson is adamant polls come before an EU summit on October 17th if the bill is passed.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want an election. The public don't want an election. I don't believe the right honourable gentleman wants an election. But if the House votes for this bill tomorrow, the public will have to choose who goes to Brussels on October the 17th to sort this out and take this country forward.
Conservative MPs who voted against the government now face the threat of expulsion from the party. They include Winston Churchill's grandson, Nicholas Soames, and two former finance ministers, Philip Hammond and Ken Clark.
Meanwhile, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Human Rights Commission has condemned India's month-long curfew in occupied Kashmir. In a statement, it also expressed concern over India's complete communications blackout in the valley. The OIC's Human Rights Commission has asked India to restore all fundamental freedoms and civil liberties in the occupied territory. It also called on India to allow unfettered access to UN and OIC fact-finding missions seeking to evaluate the human rights situation in occupied Kashmir. Meanwhile, thousands of people have staged a protest outside the Indian High Commission in London against the illegal annexation of Kashmir. The Kashmir Freedom March procession moved from London's Parliament Square to the Indian Mission to express solidarity with suffering Kashmiris. Pakistan's U.S. envoy Asad Majid has warned India's crackdown on Kashmir can destabilize the region to the point of a nuclear war. In an interview, Majid said the situation in the occupied valley is worsening with every passing hour. He said the escalation on the line of control and the kinds of weapons India has started using should worry the world immensely. Meanwhile, New Delhi's crushing curfew and communication blackout in occupied Kashmir has entered the 31st day. The Indian newspaper The Hindu reports markets, business centers, public transport and railways have remained closed. Contrary to New Delhi's claims of opening communication channels, The Hindu is reporting total radio silence in the occupied valley. The Indian media outlet The Wire wrote that Kashmiris have been exposed to shock and awe tactics, belittled and humiliated during the last month. Meanwhile, BJP-backed Mayor of Srinagar, Junaid Mattu, has also been placed under house arrest after he criticized the BJP government. Well, the third round of talks between Pakistan and India on the Kartarpur corridor is being held along the Attari border in India today. Foreign Office spokesperson Dr. Mohammad Faisal said Islamabad hopes for progress in this round to finalize the project agreement. The corridor is a peace initiative by Islamabad to facilitate the travel of Sikh pilgrims between Pakistan and India. Elsewhere, a United Nations panel says the U.S., Britain and France may be complicit in war crimes in Yemen. A report by UN investigators called on all states to ban arms supplies to warring parties in the country. Investigators say they have sent a secret list of people who may be responsible for international crimes to the UN rights chief. The report highlights violations, killings, and torture by all sides in Yemen's conflict. Investigators have said they've identified individuals responsible for those crimes. They will present their second report to the UN Human Rights Council on September 10th, covering airstrikes, shelling, and landmines. Since 2015, fighting in Yemen has claimed tens of thousands of lives, sparking a major humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, Iran says it will resume full compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal if it is allowed to make $15 billion in oil sales. Speaking to reporters in Slovenia, Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran wants the proposed sale to be sanctioned over a 4-month period. Earlier, France proposed opening a $15 billion credit line to Iran if it agrees to fully comply with the 2015 nuclear deal. Yesterday, Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said Tehran would soon reveal the details of further withdrawals from its commitments under the accord. He said the deal can be salvaged only if signatories other than Iran also fulfill their commitments. The United States has imposed sanctions on 3 Iranian space agencies. The move is part of Washington's efforts to ramp up pressure over Tehran's nuclear program. The United States Treasury Department has targeted the Iran Space Agency, Space Research Center, and Astronautics Research Institute. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the sanctions have been imposed for engaging in proliferation activities. He said this is the first time the U.S. has sanctioned Iran's civilian space agencies used for advancing the ballistic missile program. Last year, U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from a 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, saying it did not go far enough. Nine former U.S. envoys have warned the U.S. against withdrawing its troops from Afghanistan. The envoys expressed their views after being briefed on the Doha peace talks by the White House. They say pulling all troops out of the country will lead to a brutal civil war, which will be catastrophic for Washington. In an article, the ambassadors wrote that the initial U.S. drawdown should not be so fast that the Taliban believe they can achieve military victory. Meanwhile, the UN's envoy in Kabul, Tadamichi Yamamoto, has called for an end to violence through dialogue. In northern Iraq, meanwhile, 9 ISIS militants have been killed in Nineveh province during a military operation backed by the U.S.-led coalition. The Iraqi Joint Operations spokesman, Yahya Rasool, says the coalition's aircraft destroyed a tunnel in Mosul, killing militants. A military officer says the move is part of the ongoing anti-ISIS operation by the Iraqi and U.S. coalition in the country. United States President Donald Trump has warned China a trade deal will get much tougher if he wins a second term in office. He says China's economy cannot withstand a long wait for a deal and its businesses will crumble. Trump says the U.S. is doing well in their trade negotiations with China. Earlier, Chinese Vice Premier Liu He met U.S. Republican Senators Steve Daines and David Perdue in Hong Kong. He said China is against a trade war because it is not in the interests of the U.S., the China, or the world. Trade negotiations are due to resume this month after a sharp deterioration in the year-long dispute during August. Meanwhile, in the U.S. itself, a 14-year-old boy shot dead 5 members of his family at their home in the southeastern state of Alabama. The boy later threw away his pistol and called police. The teenager has confessed to killing his father, stepmother, and siblings. Police found the handgun on the side of a nearby road. The killings follow a rash of mass shootings in the United States, including the most recent in Texas that left 7 people dead. France has announced a €5 million package of anti-femicide measures as its female death toll crossed 100. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe announced the plan while addressing a national forum on domestic violence. He said the funds will be used to create 1,000 shelter homes for victims of violence against women. He said an audit will also be carried out to identify failures in the way police deal with victims' complaints. Launched on September 3rd, the National Forum will run until November 25th. It will gather experts, NGOs, and government members to push for action on femicides. In Guinea-Bissau, police have seized over 1,800 kilograms of cocaine on the country's northern coast. Hidden in flour bags, the seizure is considered the biggest in the country's history. Police said the drugs arrived by sea from Colombia. 8 people were arrested, including 4 Guineans, 3 Colombians, and a Malian. Police say the drugs belonged to an Al-Qaeda-linked network, primarily based in northern and central Mali. After resisting the government for 5 decades, a struggle that claimed the lives of almost 300,000 people, the FARC signed a peace deal in 2016. But as is expected of rebels and conflict-torn governments, brokered peace lives a short life. So too in Colombia, where the murder of mayoral candidate has brought the ex-guerrilla fighters back in the spotlight. More in this report.
A vehicle carrying Karina Garcia, a Liberal Party candidate in the municipality of Suarez in Cauca province, and 5 other victims was shot at. The government has alleged the demobilized FARC guerrilla group is behind the attack. This killing is the first since some prominent former members of the rebel group said they were rearming.
Because she had been targeted and demonized by some candidates who had been targeting and threatening her and sending her threats. She had been threatened and had reported this. They had been demonizing her name and calling into question her work, and these are the consequences of irresponsibility of the opposing candidates who intentionally harmed my daughter.
The area contains important drug production and trafficking routes, and dissidents who reject the 2016 peace accord are known to operate there. In a statement, the Defense Ministry offered a reward of $44,000 for information leading to 2 dissident leaders.
We have offered a reward of 100 million pesos for alias Mayimbu and 50 million pesos for alias Marlon. In the next few days, we will proceed to edit the respective posters so that it is public knowledge to be distributed in such a way that people who have valuable information can make it reach the intelligence bodies in order to be able to act against them.
The killings of some former rebels and delays in government funding for economic efforts have sparked criticism of the government. But a majority of the FARC rebels support the deal, despite facing economic difficulties and reintegration.
And coming up next in this news bulletin. Arctic sea ice declines by 12% every decade since 1979. And families of missing Iraqis share endless anguish. Hurricane Durian has pounded parts of Florida's coast with wind and rain. The slow-moving hurricane killed at least 7 people in the Abaco Islands in the northern Bahamas. 9 counties in Florida have ordered mandatory evacuations. Authorities also ordered over 1 million people to evacuate in nearby states on the U.S. East Coast. The National Hurricane Center says Durian has weakened to a Category 2 storm with wind speeds of over 190 kilometers per hour. Georgia, as well as North and South Carolina, have declared states of emergencies. Elsewhere, the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard is one of the northernmost inhabited areas in the world. People living here have a front row seat to the changes in the Arctic being caused by global warming. A report by the Norwegian Center for Climate Services warns the area's temperature could rise by up to 10 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. This report has more.
Kim Holmen, the national director of the Norwegian Polar Institute, has lived at Svalbard for 30 years. He describes the changes he has seen as profound, large and rapid.
We are losing the Svalbard we know. We are losing the Arctic as we know it because of climate change. This is a forewarning of all the hardship and problems that will spread around the planet. It is important to stop it as quickly and as soon as possible.
Average temperatures in Svalbard have risen by 4 degrees Celsius over the last 50 years. Arctic sea ice is declining by an average of 12% every 10 years since 1979. This has had severe consequences for the people of the world's northernmost town, Guinea Benin.
As the permafrost thaws, things that are in the ground tend to be pulled up. That's happening more or less all the time. So we might see that the graves literally come up, the coffins.
Climate change is also raising the risk of avalanches in Guinea Benin. The Norwegian Center for Climate Services warns things will only get worse over the rest of the century.
In Iraq, hundreds of thousands of people have gone missing, the victims of political and religious persecution during the Saddam era and later. The country has one of the highest counts of missing persons in the world, and their loved ones are still unable to move on, as we see in this report.
Iraq has one of the highest number of missing persons, according to the International Committee of Red Cross. The numbers range between 250,000 and well over 1 million. The discrepancy indicates both staggering loss and the difficulty of documenting such cases.
We have more than 30,000 registered in the Martyrs Foundation. It is expected that there are more than 100,000 abducted and missing persons during the two periods.
Samia Khasro's family was broken by the disappearance of loved ones and the anguish of not knowing their fate.
To this day, we are still waiting until we receive their bones, then we know they are dead.
More than 250 kilometers north in the province of Kirkuk, another family lives in similar pain. Ronak Mohammed has not seen her husband since he was drafted as a reserve soldier in 1982. All she now has is his wristwatch and wedding band.
He was an employee in the North Oil Company. He was informed he had to serve for a month. He was transferred to Amara city later, but he never came back after that.
Iraq has made some progress in its missing case files in recent months. Several mass graves dating back to the Anfal campaign and the 1991 Gulf War over Kuwait have been uncovered. But families are frustrated that the scale of work dwarfs the government's allocated resources.
Asian stock markets are trading mixed as investors weigh economic data from China and the U.S. in their escalating trade war. Wall Street shed about 1% overnight after data showed U.S. factory activity shrank in August for the first time since early 2016. Investors were also affected by a hardening of U.S. President Donald Trump's tone on trade talks with China. But Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has gained more than nearly 1.5% on a reported 3-month high in China's services sector activity. The Shanghai Composite is also fractionally up. Japan's Nikkei 225 index is marginally higher after a South Korean consumer boycott caused a slump in automobile sales. Seoul's Kospi index is also in positive territory. Earlier, the pound rebounded from multi-year lows after Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government lost its parliamentary majority. Time to find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here at Indus News.